In this video, we will learn how to find out the demand functions for good x and y from the given utility function and the budget constraint. The question is, given utility function of a consumer is, utility is a function of two goods which is equal to x times y, and the budget constraint that the consumer is facing, that is price of good x times units of good x plus price of good y times units of good y, and it should be equal to the income of the consumer. Okay, we want to find out the utility maximizing bundle, that is we want to find out the demand function for good x and y. Okay, so since we want to utility maximizing bundle, so this question is actually the utility maximization problem. That means consumer wants to maximize the utility derived from the consumption of two goods which are related like this, x times y. Okay, subject to the budget constraint that he is facing, that is price of good x times units of good x plus price of good y times units of good y, and it should be equal to the income of the consumer. So graphically what happens? So if we have good x on the horizontal axis, good y on the vertical axis, we are being given the budget line. Okay, this is our budget line. So this is our budget line. With the given budget, consumer wants to get highest utility. So let's say this is the indifference curve 1, then we have indifference curve 2 here. Okay, so what happens at optimality? What happens? The slope of the budget line and the slope of the indifference curve should be equal. So at equilibrium what happens? Slope of indifference curve should be equal to the slope of budget line. What is slope of the indifference curve? It is simply the marginal rate of substitution between two goods. And what is the slope of the budget line? It is the ratio of the prices, price of x upon price of good y. Okay, so this condition should be satisfied. So it happens at this point where the indifference curve and the budget line are tangent to each other. Now MRS is, as we know, it is the ratio of the marginal utility of good x and marginal utility of good y, and it should be equal to the ratio of the prices, that's price of good x upon price of good y. Now what is MUX? It implies marginal utility of good x is simply the change in the utility due to the change in the consumption of good x. MUY is simply the change in the utility due to the consumption of the good, change in the consumption of good y. Should be equal to price of x upon price of y. Okay, now the partial derivative of this utility function with respect to x means the derivative of x will be 1, so we are left with y. Likewise, the derivative of this utility function with respect to y, so the derivative of y will be 1, so we are left with x. Should be equal to price of x upon price of good y. Solving for y, y will be equal to price of x upon price of y times x. To find out the demand function for good x, what will we do? We plug this value of y into the budget line or in the budget constraint. And let me see if I have space available here. Okay, so let me write it here. So plug y is equal to this in this stuff. So we get, let me solve it here. So we have price of x times units of good x plus price of y, and the value of y is, that's price of x upon price of y times x, should be equal to the income of the consumer. Here py gets cancelled, so we have px into x, px into x, so we have the same two terms, we can add them, so that means twice px into x is equal to m, which implies x will be equal to, or x is equal to, it will be equal to m divided by, transpose it here, it gets divided, so we have 2 px. This is the demand function for good x. Likewise, the demand function for good y will be equal to m upon 2 py. So these are the basically the Marshallian demand functions. If I write it here, x subscript m, y subscript m, superscript sorry, m, these are the Marshallian demand functions. So Marshallian demands are the functions of income and prices. From the Marshallian demand function, we can also find out the indirect utility function. Okay, so this is the direct utility function. Okay, utility is a function of two goods x and y. By indirect utility function, what we mean, the utility is a function of the prices and the income. Obviously, consumer gets utility by consuming some good x and y, but to consume these goods he has to give some price and he should have some income also. That means indirectly utility is a function of income and prices. So how do we find out the indirect utility function? So indirect utility function, let's denote by v. It will be a function of price of good x, price of good y, and income of the consumer. So we plug the Marshallian demand functions into the direct utility function to get the indirect utility function. So in place of x we have m upon 2px, m upon 2px. In place of y we have m upon 2py, and it will be equal to m square divided by 2 into 2 is 4, price of x times price of y. This is our indirect utility function. Okay, so the simple difference between direct and indirect utility function is, so when we say direct utility function, we say utility derived from consumption of two goods x and y. Let us say it is a function x times y. Obviously we get the utility by consuming some goods. In case of indirect utility function, what we say? We say so we call this direct utility function. Direct utility function. Now in case of indirect utility function, we have price of x, price of y, and income. That is, utility is a function of prices of goods and the income. Okay, and in this case we got m square upon 4px py. So in this case we say that utility depends upon the prices of goods and the income of the consumer, and it makes sense here. Okay, so utility, so we get utility from consumption of two goods, but to consume these two goods there will be some price that we have to pay and the income that we should have. Okay, that means utility is indirectly, rather utility indirectly depends upon the prices and the income of the consumer. I hope I make myself clear in this video. If you find out these videos helpful, please share it with your friends. Okay, that will be the only motivation for me to make more useful videos for you. Okay, you know, I don't charge a single penny for these videos. I make these videos free of cost on YouTube. I don't teach anyone, rather I do not teach at anywhere. Whatever I do, it's my hobby to make videos on the mathematical economics. Okay, so your support is necessary for that. Okay, so to make these videos, it takes time, energy, and if you give your valuable feedback, that will make me more motivating person. So I will be more motivated to make good content for you people. Okay, see you in next video. Thank you.